Hi, welcome once again to Growth is Personal podcast. Today, we're going to be having a phenomenal conversation once again. I have with me a special guest, an important guest, a phenomenal guest, someone who is thriving here in Canada, and she's been doing exploits. She published a book recently, so we're going to be having a phenomenal conversation. If you're watching for the very first time, welcome to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe. Leave a comment after you watch this today's episode. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, be sure to follow. We see a lot of people listening, but we don't see the following. So please follow the podcast, subscribe, and share with your friend. All right. Okay. So let's jump right in.
Hi, my name is Emeka Nwarulor and welcome to Growth is Personal. Each week, I share insights and strategies that will equip you to accelerate your personal and professional growth and bring you conversations that will empower you to thrive in life, career, and business.
Welcome to the podcast Adedoyinsola. Let me pronounce this fully. Adedoyinsola Abitoye. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mika.
Yeah, welcome. I remember when we connected and our first conversation, it was almost like we're having a boot camp. We had to, a 15 minutes conversation went to 30 minutes, because we share, passions that are alike, and we have same passion for adding value to people. So I'm glad that you're here on the podcast today. So we're going to go right in. Tell us
Thank
about Adedoyinsola. What is your story? What inspired? Now you're in Canada. I know you've been, Nigeria at some. You grew up in Nigeria, but here in Canada. Tell us about your journey. What inspired you to be in Canada? What is your story? What can we understand of for Adedoyinsola 10 years ago and Adedoyinsola today?
Thank you so much, Emeka. I always tell people, you can call me Doyin also,
Mhm.
and some
Okay.
people would call me Coach Dee, right? So back to your question, who is Adedoyinsola? Who is Doyin? So my Doyin is an HR professional who has over 14 years experience doing HR, and aside that, I am a certified um, coach, life and wellness coach. And just like Emeka said, I just recently wrote and authored my and published my book called Shush. I like to do this when I say the name Shush.
Yes.
Right. That was in February this year. And I have two handsome boys. And I am also happily married to a very supportive husband. And if I am not doing HR, I'm not coaching people, I'm not mentoring. I love to bake. I tell
Mm.
people baking and decorating cakes helps me distress. People wonder how is that true? How does that? But anyways, back to your question. We moved to Canada, or should I say, I moved to Canada 2019. But then our story is a quite funny one. Honestly,
Mm.
I moving to Canada wasn't my idea. It was that of my husband. Um, but what would I do? I had to support him, but I wasn't sold. I'm sure you're wondering, so then how did you complete your whole process and all that? So for every time he
Right.
says it's time to do IELT, I'll follow. I'll practice, I'll go. It's time for medicals, I'll go. It's time to sign this document, I'll go. It's time to provide this, I'll provide. So I just gave all the support and all that. And finally we got the PR, and it was a case of what do we do with this? And so after a lot of back and forth, we decided to do a soft landing. I'm sure people know what that means. That way you just come, settle in, get all the documents stamped, open account if you have to. And so 2018, we did have a soft landing, right? And then at that point, we're like, even if I had to come, I was looking to settle in BC, Victoria, BC, because
Mm.
then I had read on the internet that it doesn't snow there because I really don't like the cold. Sorry, I'm saying that. I'm sure you'll be wondering. So why are you in Canada? So I was like, I did a lot of research, and they said Victoria, BC just would rain there. So I was like, okay, I'll take the rain anytime, any day. So I wanted Victoria, BC. My husband wanted us to settle in Toronto because he felt like it would be easy for us to get a job. He's a finance person and all that. So we were not so convinced on what to do. So what we did was, when we did our soft landing, we did land in Alberta with a family member. His brother stays in Alberta. So we landed there, and then we decided to take tours. So for us then, it was like a vacation, right?
Mm.
So we then went to Victoria, BC, and then from Victoria, BC, we did go to come to Toronto, right, just to see. But then when I got to Victoria, I was like, this is not for me. This is not for me at all, that kind of thing. But anyways, like I was saying, finally we went back home. We did vacation, enjoyed time with the kids and all that, landed softly, went back home. And then in 2000, and fast forward to 2019,
Mm-hmm.
my husband was like, Doyin, we need to start thinking about going to using this PR thing that we have. And then you won't believe this guy came up with an idea that, Doyin, you have to go first. Me, that I didn't want to go, that kind of thing. Man, it took a lot of convincing. It took a lot of me even stepping back. I had to pray. I was like, God, what do you need me to do? Until I heard a voice saying that, go out, make every crooked path straight. That's when I decided to take a bold step in 2019 to come test the waters. So I came ahead of my family. My two boys and my husband were back home, and I came here. Man, those early months were humbling.
Mm.
Emeka, culture shock,
Mm.
fear of unknown. There were just a lot of voices in my head saying, what if you fail? What if you don't succeed? And aside that, to cap it off, there were a lot of rejections and all that and all that. So I'm going to stop talking to see if you have follow-up questions, or I don't know
Right, right.
if I answered the question. Yeah.
No, it's good to share that, because I think, we're in a point where we have a lot of people who, for one reason or the other, they had to, move countries to a new country, and they're trying to, get ahead above water. So hearing stories of people who have been here, and how they've navigated is so important. So we're going to be talking, specifically about how we've been able to navigate the challenges, how you've been able to embrace opportunities, and how you've been able to create value, in this new country. So thank you for sharing that story. I think, something that everybody have a different story why they're here. Some people came in, or came into Canada or different countries wherever they relocated to for different reasons, right? But the goal I always tell people is that at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself a question: that now I'm here, what next? What do I want to do? What value do I want to add, right? I was speaking to someone the other day. There's a different mindset it takes to be able to thrive in a new place, right? You have to, one mindset is the mindset of scarcity, where you're always looking at what to get, who's going to help you, who's come to save you. The other mindset is the abundance mindset, where you already have value, and that I'm here for a reason, and I already have value. I have it in me. I just have to put myself out there. I have to keep developing myself and all that. So let's go to your book. I want to talk about the Shush. I love the name, by the way, because it's almost like silencing those voices, and you talk about it in your book. But I want, if we're to unpack one major lesson in that book for someone who hasn't read it, what would that be?
Okay, thank you, Emeka. You know how it is, how passionate I am about this book. Asking me to give one key lesson will be hard. But before I go into I will try to give one key lesson. I will talk about that. But before I go into the key lessons, I would like to briefly just talk about what Shush is. And I like to do this when I say Shush, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Shush is a book that was born out of my journey, right? It is a practical book, not just a normal book. It has stories in it. Some of my stories, some fictional stories, right, that I have put together. And aside from having fictional stories, it has like reframing, where you have to reflect, you have to reframe, you have to exercises. It has affirmations in it. It has journaling, and it has action plans. So it's a book that has 4 parts, about 12 chapters. So back to your question about one key lesson. So I would say that one key lesson from Shush is that the loudest limitation are not outside of us most times, right? They are the quiet noise that are very persistent. Those beliefs we carry within us that shapes how we see ourselves. Those
Mm.
voices that tells us we can't be big, those voices that tell us we can't make it, right? And so one of the biggest lesson of this is this book encourages you to, one, pause, identify those limiting beliefs, identify those voices, right? Reflect on them, reframe them, and then you can rewrite your story so that you can accept your truth, rewrite your story, and be the best version of yourself.
Mm.
I know you
Mm.
said one key lesson, but
No,
I think this summarizes
that
it.
that was good. Rewriting your story, and one of the things I wanted to talk about was to identify the limiting beliefs, because it's very easy to, you know, either ignore or out of ignorance don't even know that you have a limiting belief. But it's important to be able to realize that, okay, what exactly is stopping me from, one of the things I wrote here about your book is the what if question. What if? And we see that a lot of times, that the reason why people don't take action, the reason why people don't achieve their goals is this: what if I fail? What if nobody listens to me? What if nobody takes my application? What if nobody accepts me at this job? I don't pass this job interview. What if? The question is, what if you succeed? Like, what if you make it? What if you get a yes, right? So it's important that we identify those limiting beliefs and be also quick to reframe it, because it's easy to just dwell on that limiting belief, right? So thank you for sharing that. I'll still come back to the book, but let's talk about what were the unexpected challenges that you faced when you relocated, and how were you able to overcome them? We're talking about someone who is just moving to to Canada. You said you moved first before your family moved, your husband and your kids. What were the challenges, and how do you navigate them? If you're to share to someone who is coming new, even a woman, for example, or a man, what were those challenges, unique challenges you faced, and how you overcome them?
Hmm. In fact, were big challenges. But anyways, I don't know if I did mention while I was trying to introduce myself. At the point where I was supposed to relocate to Canada to come test the waters, like I said in 2019, I was the head of HR for a big government parastatal. So you
Hmm.
know what that means in Nigeria,
Yes, yes.
right? So it wasn't like I was struggling. I was doing well, right? At least I can say that on
Mm-hmm.
me, right? And so when I came here, one of the unexpected challenges, I didn't expect the emotional toll of starting all over again.
Hmm.
And one of the big challenges that I would say I experienced was either being overqualified yet under-recognized or underestimated.
That's right. Hmm.
So
Being over or qualified, but yet underestimated and under
under-recognized.
recognized. Hmm.
And that is, so I had to pick that. There were a lot of challenges, right? But I had to pick that in terms of career. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this call can relate to it, right?
Hmm.
Whatever it is you wear, right? When people wants to just hear your voice, wants to just see your name, wants to just listen to your accent, your communication, they just assume that, or see your color, see something, they just assume that there's nothing that can come out of this or something. I don't know what it is, it's just bias, right? And a lot of times, a lot of systemic bias. There are quite a number of challenges that I faced, but that's one big one. And I could also quickly touch on some other challenges.
Yes,
So
please.
one initially was loneliness and isolation, because when I landed in 2019, just like we said, I didn't come with my family. So what we did was, because I didn't know anyone in Toronto, that though later I found out I knew some few people, but I didn't have strong ties, right? So we had to because we were very strategic and planning about how I would settle in and just focus on my focus, right?
Hmm.
How to get a job, so that, because then my kids coming in and my husband joining us was hinged on me conquering the quest. And the quest was come in, settle in, get a job, then you go rent a house, then get a school for the kids, and then I'll bring the kids to settle in. So for me, there was a quest, right? I was
Hmm.
initially very lonely, because when I landed in an Airbnb that I stayed for 4 months.
Hmm.
So we had to get an Airbnb, because one, I didn't know where I was going to get a job. I didn't know what part. You know how you read a lot of things on internet, and then they say Bisaga is this, that, good places. You really didn't know it was center of this. Now it makes sense. When I think back in retrospect, I'm like, I'm laughing at myself. But
Hmm.
then, so we just got a place for me. Like, okay, let's remove accommodation from your worries for 4 months. Let us give you that 4 months to settle in. But trust me, those 4 months were lonely.
Hmm.
And aside that, also, I'm going to fast forward to, so finally, when I finally got a job, I now started looking for a house and a place where the kids school, good schools where the kids could go. Man, house barrier. Finding a decent accommodation was tough. And when I mean tough, not like they were not existing or they were not in existence, but people just wouldn't give you their house. Even though they say that you have the capability to pay, no one wanted to give out their house, right? I don't know how
Mm.
it is in other province, but that was my own experience. And just like, trust me, I'm talking out of my own experience. Then
Yes.
another one of the other challenges was job search. When despite the experience that you have, you would apply. And for me, I was willing to come like any HR job, even if it was HR assistant, even if it was HR coordinator, whatever it is, even if it was an HR BP role. I was willing and I was applying for all those roles. But the moment they pick up the phone, they hear your voice
Mm.
and they immediately assess that you're new or you speak differently. Trust me, there was one time I applied for an HR BP role and I sent my resume and the recruiter called me. I think the moment we started having a conversation, just said something around, oh, the people you're competing with are people who have been in this role for years. So in other words, more like you don't have the Canadian experience. Not
Mm-hmm.
saying it, but subtly saying it.
Yeah.
And aside that, also some other challenges were also was the weather. It was also some, and most importantly, the self-doubt, emotional toll, not even knowing what the future held for me, right? The
Mm.
uncertainty of will I get a job, the feeling of rejection when a lot of rejection, plenty. I wasn't even keeping track. Because for me, I focus on positivity. Then so once I'm like, it has come again, let's move on to the next. Quite a number of challenges, but I think one big one was being overqualified, yet under-recognized and underestimated.
Yes, Mary. So let's talk about how that I really want to dwell on that a little bit. So what were the things, if you're to say, the strategies or maybe one or two things you did to overcome that,
Okay.
what would you say you had done?
So going back now to what I did to overcome that. So first of all, because I'm just telling the stories in pieces. So
Mhm.
while I was planning to come, right, when they said come go and test the waters, some of the strategy was that okay, you won't just come in and just maybe stay in your little Airbnb space and be hoping to find something. So we had a plan. So the plan was while we're doing our researches, trust me, there was a lot of researches. In fact, research paralysis happened in
Mm.
that period. So part of the things we stumbled on was we stumbled on some government support programs that they had for internationally trained professionals. So
Right.
I stumbled on a program called Access Employment. I know quite a number of people listening must have heard of it. So they had a program for 7 weeks to train internationally trained HR professionals. They also have the program for different um, roles and all that for sales, for finance, for entrepreneur. But I came for their HR Connect program. So it was
Mm.
supposed to be for 7 weeks. Then COVID hadn't happened, so we had to go in person. So the idea was I landed March 31st, right? I was going to
Mhm.
start my program April 1st. So I had something that I was going to get in. So back to your question, how did I overcome this? One is finding the right information, getting into the right community. So I got into the access program. So that kind of helped me understand my industry insights, understand the rules and regulations in terms of HR. Because trust me, HR is totally different here than it was
Yeah.
in Nigeria. So I
Yeah.
had to unlearn, I had to relearn, right? And I had to learn new things, right? And so Access helped me. And while I was in Access, they had a lot of mentorship programs, they had a lot of speed coaching programs, they had lots of volunteer programs that I got into. And so while I was trying to find my feet my foot and all that in the new country, I was also trying to rebuild my confidence, right? Confidence from, oh, you apply for an HR assistant job. Someone tells you, oh, sorry, unfortunately, you didn't get the job. You know how that after a while it takes a toll on you,
On
right?
you.
And
Yes.
then for me, how did I overcome? Another way that I overcame this was I had to lean on faith.
Mm.
Trust me, I had to lean on faith. I don't know who's listening to this, but for me, I had to lean on God. So a lot of times I would go down on the floor of my Airbnb and I would cry out to God, say, "Help me! You sent me, help me, just help me." And trust me, for every time I did that, ways there were always ways. And then I also stayed very open and then I had to work on my mindset, and that's those are one of the things I have in my book, mindset. I had to stay positive. I had a determination that I was going to succeed on this quest. I saw it as a quest.
Mm.
because everything was inched on it, right? I had to stay grateful for every wins that I made. Like for instance, I say I learned a new policy that was strange that I didn't know what it was. I would always celebrate that. So I celebrated my little wins. Or for instance, let's say when I did a network, I met a new network who were having conversation or whatever it is, I always celebrated my little wins and I made sure I embraced my community. And when I'm talking about community, I'm not just even talking about just access, because when I came in, there was a colleague in Nigeria who told me, "Oh, you're going to Canada. I know some people." And she gave me their number, but I didn't reach out. But they reached out to me and they came looking for me. So they
Mm.
invited me to their church. Immediately I stepped into the church, they embraced me as like the church community. And I'm sure the same thing happens to Muslims. They have that community, and this is a community that we really do not talk about most times when you're settling in. And so right now, I really tell newcomers, look for government support programs such as Access or their other types, so that you have soft landing. Look for communities. When you go into your church or you go into your mosque and they're talking about first timers, I don't know if you do that in mosques, stand up. You need that community. I'm going to stop talking and see if you
Mm.
have further questions to build on
That's
what I've
very
said.
true. You know,
Yeah.
the thing is, it takes courage, because what I see is people come here, they say that, they're expressing loneliness, but they're not having they're not summoning the courage to step out and be and create a community that would help them navigate, that loneliness. It's so important. I mean, for me, it wasn't. I didn't really build that much community when I came in, right? Like it was more of, okay. Then my wife was already here, so I came and I joined her, and then we started, navigating this whole thing called life, and finding a job and all. So I didn't really go through all these programs that are existing in the government and everything. So, but now we're seeing it coming up. So it's important that people embrace those opportunities. But also, one thing you mentioned was the mindset, believing that it's possible. It's possible to make a way for yourself. It's possible to make a way, because most times you see that because of the rejection, the denial, people tend to settle. They get discouraged. But if you dare discouraged and don't keep trying, you will not get it. You will not make any impact. You will not make any way. So I think it's important to realize that the mindset is so important. The resolve that I will make my way, no matter what comes, no matter the challenges that I'm facing. So let's talk about, one thing I wanted to talk about is identity. There's this thing about people coming here, and there's this, okay, who am I here now? Like, do I have to change to a different person to be able to adapt? Now, because this is so important, where people say things like, oh, it looks like, here the culture here, requires you to re re reinvent yourself and be a different person, right? When it comes to values, how is that so important in navigating the culture here for you? What was that like for you? Because you mentioned HR, two different environments, HR here and HR back home. How did you navigate that to still be true to your values?
Okay, thank you so much for that question, Emeka. So I would say for me then when I came, don't forget I'd mentioned all the old emotional toll, all the challenges and all that. We can't take out of our stories that we face as immigrant. But one thing that I kept so close to myself were my values, right? And for me, everywhere I find myself, I am very authentic. I am authentically myself. So one thing is that I tell people I can be very fluid, and I tell people stay fluid. In this journey, you have to stay fluid. You have to stay flexible. So for me, but I adapt without erasing who I am. Who is Adedoyinsola? Who
Mm.
is Doyin? And she's that person who walks into the room looking so bright with a smile, right? So some people still say, even some of my Nigerian friends and colleagues back home, maybe when I call them, say happy birthday or just check up on them, they're like, doing, you cannot change. You are still beautiful. You are still, you don't even have that phone thing. You're just still yourself. And I'm like, I can't change. And so for me, the values that kept me going were one, like I said, always authentically myself, being
Mhm.
myself. Um, always been there to wanting to help others, even though I was trying to also help myself because I knew. And one thing that also kept me going was I said to myself, for every time I learned something new or something that could help me, I never kept it to myself. I would share with my other colleagues that I met
Mhm.
in access who were also in the same boat and the same shoes that I was at that point, to say, okay, so for me, that's how I solidified learning. And also, I believe in when I rise, others rise. So once I find a job, even if it's not something that I'm interested in, or something I'm interested in, I share it out so that who knows, it might not be for you, could be for someone else. And then for me, to stay true to my value, I keep my faith, my faith in God constant. Even
Mm.
though I have faced a lot of challenges, I go back to my source.
That's
Then
right.
for me, culture. I still wear my native. I still speak my language, right? My friends, like I see them right now. We start to gist, even with my spouse, we speak Yoruba. Even my kids, teaching them how to speak Yoruba. So I am still true to my culture. Even catching up with my parents, we're still talking about, because my parents are from Ilefe. We still talk about
Mm-hmm.
that, right? And then just saying centered, true to myself, even when I'm
Mm.
learning new ways of doing
Mm.
things,
Mm.
right? And for me, the way I see adaptation is, I see it as growth. It's not a compromise. You're
Mm.
growing.
Mm.
So once I'm learning the new ways of doing things, because these things that we learn here, small talks, we weren't doing small talks, right? I was learning a lot of things, even as simple as the first time I drove, when I finally got my car
Mm.
and I was supposed to refill my gas. I got to the gas station. In this part of the world, you don't have attendants standing
Yep.
in the gas
Yeah.
station like you have
Yeah.
in Nigeria.
Uh-huh.
And I got down from my car after opening to my car, whatever, for the
Mm-hmm.
gas, put my gas in.
Yeah. Gas
I
tank.
started
Yeah.
looking. I was like, what do I do? How? I had to humbly walk up to a guy that I saw close to me, also trying to get gas. Say, please, this is my first time doing this. Can you kindly show me what to do?
Mm.
I'm sure people will be laughing, but trust me, it was part of the unlearning and learning.
That's right.
So
That's
for
right.
me, I was humble enough to ask, right? And for
Mm.
some things that keeps me going is I honor where I am from while I'm learning where I am, my values, my faith, integrity, and empathy, because I know I was once in that shoes. And that's why I tell people, for me, is I've said it, I would always pay it forward. And that's why I do a lot of volunteering, mentoring people. I do a lot of coaching new immigrants, and even writing Shush came out of my journey. Like, how can I make people become better? Right. And
Mm.
so for me, integrity is non-negotiable while I remain authentically myself.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring a question. I want to get your thoughts on it. Let's talk about, because it's still on identity, names. We hear a lot of times people say, "Oh, when you come here, you have to change, your name and all of that." I mean, people have told me that, "Why do you use Emeka?" Because my name is also Felix, but I use Emeka. I said I'm going to use Emeka. They will learn how to. So, and I see Adedoyinsola. What do you think about, this thought about people saying that they have to change their name to be able to navigate their way in their career here?
So thanks for that question. So for me, I'm going to speak for myself, because
Mm.
really different people are in different shoes and different boats,
Mm.
right? So for me, from the moment, okay, I have English names. In fact, I have two English names, the one my parents gave me and the baptismal name. So I have English names that I could use,
Yes.
right? But the point is, I'd always said my name is my identity. That's how you know where I'm from. And that's why even with my book that I wrote, I had to write my full name. The best that I have done so far is, right now in this part of the world, we'll ask you your preferred name. So what I have done so far is taking out the prefix and the suffix. So I still write my full name as my legal name when they get to the part of preferred, because you also need to be able to help people
Yeah.
call your name. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just take out the prefix, the suffix, and then say that you can call me Doyin.
Mm.
But for me, that is who I am. Adedoyinsola holds a deep meaning, and that reminds me of who I am. Even when I'm facing any kind of challenges, it just reminds me, Doyin, you are the daughter of the soil. Like, you are the princess of whatever it is. You understand all those good talks. So for me, my name still remains Doyin. The best I can do is Doyin. And sometimes, let me just make you laugh. Sometimes if I want to just be naughty, when I go, maybe say for instance, I go to the clinic, you know how you fill forms waiting for them to call you, or you
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere and you have to fill forms, put your name. Sometimes I will write my full name, and then you find out that when it's time for them to call you, you just find out the person is holding the paper for a
If
long time, just trying to figure. And then I just start to smile and I just stand up to say it's me. Like, and then they say, okay, so how do you call your name? And then you try to tell them, and then sometimes I say, okay, just take out the prefix and the suffix. Sometimes I get very naughty, I do that. So back to what you say. For me, my name, and even my kids, they have English names, but the names that they use in this part of the world is their Yoruba name, their full name. In fact, sometimes I don't know doing, please even remove the Jason from this name and like just write, like for instance, my first son is called Jason Morekami.
Mm.
My and it has a deep meaning. My second son is called Munireolua. I said the best we can do is to say, okay, call him Morekami. Maybe that's easier to call. And then Munireolua, we say, okay, Munire.
Mm.
So even my kids, right? But then back to what I said, it's my own decision, right? Different people would pick whatever works for them. So for instance, my husband has a Yoruba name, but ever since from the moment I met him, he has always been his people have always called him his English name, but I call him his Yoruba name. And I
Right.
was laughing because I remember a story that something that happened recently and it was like doing, how come that we'll go somewhere? When I introduce myself as he calls his name, and then maybe along the line when we're having conversation, I would just then call him his
Yoruba.
traditional name. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's just reflex. I can't help it. But anyways, yeah, I can go on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think it's personal preference, and it's
yeah.
also knowing the importance, like you said, your belief of that name grounds you, and it's part of your identity. So just know what works for you. Because I tell people, ask me, oh, do I have to change my? I'm like, you don't have to change your name. You just have to believe in what you stand for. So if you using your traditional name, use the traditional name and stand with it. If you choose to use your English name, use your English name, right? It's personal preference, but the goal is not to be something that you're not just because you want to be able to fit in, right? That's not going to work in the long run, because at the end of the day, you're like, it's almost like you are contradicting yourself, because you're trying to be something that you and it's your name anyway, but the idea is that who you are at the core is who you are at the core, and your name that you have built over the years to be who you are at the core should be what still drives you, and you don't change that because you want to be accepted. Now let's go to as professionals, how have you been able to build and I like to talk about this a lot, because we see that people who move to a new country, immigrant and all, don't take this very seriously. When it comes to your personal brand and your professional brand, how have you been able to stay true to your personal brand? How have you been able to build that such that people know your name, people identify you for something, especially as moving to a new country and immigrant? What has that done for you, and how have you been able to build your personal brand here in Canada? Because right
Hmm.
now, if I Google, Adedoyin, I see your pictures everywhere. I see, and I think one of the tool, your book has really helped as well. So tell us about how you've been able to build your personal brand here in Canada.
Hmm. Thank you so much for that question. I'm sure you'll be saying every time you ask a question, I'll always say thank you so much, Emeka. Unfortunately, that's me. You have to be polite, you have to be professional as much as
Yeah.
you can. So
Mhm.
talking about my personal brand, the point is I tell people, if someone types in your name into the internet, what comes up?
Mm.
And a lot of times I try it. I just put my name in and it brings up all that. So how have I been able to do this? It's just been I would say intentionally just putting myself out there positively, right? Even way before the book came out. So myself, even as a professional, all the old certifications, all the old just working and improving on myself, on myself, sorry. Um, the courses I've taken, the all the things I have just been doing to make sure that I'm fluid, I'm agile, I'm able to fit into this new country, has just been things that I have consciously done, right, to build myself, my name, my brand. So, like for instance, you go to LinkedIn, what do you see? You go in on my Instagram, what do you see? Even when I was building my website, my coaching website, also consciously doing that, right? And now that I have done the book Shush, that I've written the book Shush and it's out there, also pushing that out. So I'm sure I've just made a lot of tours, made a lot of everywhere, shush, 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 right? So it's just a conscious and intentional. So I'll just say being intentional about it
Right.
and being passionate about what you strongly believe in. So I'm going to stop for now and see if you have other follow-up
Yeah.
questions regarding that.
Very, very good points. You mentioned being intentional, because what I've observed is that people don't take that side of the impressions that they have out there. Because I tell people that the the career journey, the decisions that people make about them, either to get them for, into a job, or to bring them as partners, is all about perception. It's all about how people perceive you, right? You could have an actual value, you could be very valuable, you could be talented, you could have the skill, but if people don't perceive you in that light, right, they will not want to associate with you, right? So I always say, as much as you build your actual value, which is, in terms of personal growth, developing yourself, getting better, you also have to build perceived value. How do people perceive you out there, right? And this is, part of what you're saying about showing up, making sure that your footprint, the digital footprint, is what you want to be identified with, right? So, but we don't see a lot of professionals do this. They just go about their career and they're doing their job, and one day the job is gone, and they're like, okay, what do I do next? How do I put myself out there? So I always tell people, as you're building yourself, developing core competencies and skill, make sure you're building your personal brand, because the decisions that are going to be made oftentimes will be made when you're not in the room. So you can't even defend your competencies. You can't even tell them if you're good at the job. It's what you have, the perceived value you have built in their mind based on your interactions with them, your footprint. When it comes to your LinkedIn profile, what do they see? Do they see value? Do they see professionalism? Do they see quality? When you're in a meeting, do you contribute? In that meeting, do you add value, so that when you're not in the room, the value you have added will begin to speak for you? So I think what you've said is, and your book, for example, I tell people, there's nothing that stops you from writing a book. I mean, I think everyone should write a book. I'm working on my second, but you should, as long as you are here on earth, you have developed experience and expertise, you have to document it. I mean, look at where we are today. We are a product of documentation of those who have gone ahead of us. And if we are not intentional, I mean, the next generation, we all had a conversation when we first met. I said, though, the challenge I see is the first immigrant, or the first generation immigrant, are not intentional about setting the stage for the second generation, because we're leaving the second generation to just figure things out. The only way we are able to, for the second generation to model the first, is for us to begin to document our journey, for us to begin to share and mentor like you're doing, right? Because that's part of our legacy. Some people say, oh, I came here because of my kids. I came here so that they can have a good life. How are you intentional about making sure that they have a good life? Is it just by paying the rent and making sure that you're having a good life? Are you intentional about documenting, passing on the knowledge and experience that you've had? And I know you have something to share about this, because I know when we're talking about that. But let's talk about it now. How can parents, first generation immigrants who are moving here now, become more intentional about preparing the second generation?
Okay. Before I go into answering that question, I would like to say congratulations in advance on your second book,
Thanks.
because you did mention that, right? I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm looking forward to reading that, and I'm sure it's going to be profound, as you and everything you do has been. Okay, so back to your question, what are we doing, first generation immigrants? What are we doing to help our own children, right? I
Yes.
got that question.
Yes.
Okay,
Second generation.
so I would say, just like I'm sure you'll be like, why are you always saying intentional? In everything you do, right? You have to be intentional. So for instance, sometimes we've made jokes like, oh, so should we go back? And then we sit back and say, if we go back with these kids, our kids will find themselves in the same position we found ourselves 6 years ago when we came, trying to find their footings. So back to the question, what are we doing? So one, intentionally placing your kids in the right place. So for instance, ensuring, or letting be clear that some things are non-negotiable, such as education. You will finish your education, even if you want to be a musician. Finish course. That we didn't come this far for you to just drop out of school. I'm sure people will say, oh, but drop out, do well. Yeah, not a problem. So that's why I said preference. Your
Please
personal
not
value.
drop out. Let's even talk about not just drop out because people always emphasize this drop out thing. Go and check those people that have dropped out. They didn't drop out from just any environment. They
Yes,
have,
sir.
for example, you see someone that said they drop out, but they're dropping out from schools like Stanford I mean
Harvard and school.
they've already gotten knowledge and and they're already running
Exposure,
with it. And you say drop no.
network.
Finish school.
Yeah. So thank you for elaborating that. And I said
Yeah.
that because some people will come and push up there. I know, well, there are Jobs, Steve, and all that. So one, know what your values are as a family. Why have we come this far, right?
Mm,
What do we want to pass on to our kids? Be intentional about that. And then for me, I would also say, when people talk about network,
yeah.
mhm, and now I'm going to bring network to the context of immigrants settling in a new country. This also has to be an intentional act of building relationship with people. So
Mm,
as you are growing and trying to settle in, also ensure that your kids also you're putting them in the right place at the right time. So for instance, now that there's I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call you out.
mm,
You Made, there's a program that they're having for black kids. It's a coding program. They
mm.
have for girls, they have for boys, and they just have very beautiful plans. And so I used to make my kids do the online one. Now they've been having this in person once in a month. We take them there. It's
That's
a lot of having to block our calendar too. And when we go there, we see other black parents there with their kids. So meaning that everyone is being intentional about what they want from their kids. And then also when you network with even people that are not the same color as you're learning a lot of things. So
that's
the same way as you're doing that, also pulling your kids along, right? So that they are learning hidden rules. They are learning where access to opportunities. Because trust me, we are not an island of no one is an island on their own.
yes,
You
yes.
don't know where opportunity and until you network, until you are in the right place, the right time, you won't even know of hidden opportunities. So how
Mm,
are we setting our next generation up for success is one, making sure that they have the basic, which is education, right? Exposure, what you expose them to, the
that's right.
values that you're passing on to them. Because,
Mm,
yeah, fine, yeah, we're abroad. But the point is, some values have held us this far.
mm,
And those same values, fine, yeah, we might tweak a little bit of them, are the values that they have to hold on and pass on to their children,
mm.
right? And also some of the things that we also do is look for mentors. The time myself and my husband were talking, okay, do we find mentors for our son who was going to be a teenager there, or do we find, do you understand? Because I know the value in one having coaches, because I'm a coach myself, I'm a life coach myself. I know
Yeah,
the values of having mentor. I have benefited from mentors. So also, so we try to push them out to activities that keeps them going.
that's right.
I can go on and on with this.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean, very, very good point. Education, and when it comes to education, I tell people don't just take only what is given to them in school. Parents are responsible to also educate, right? See, let them know what is asset, what's a liability. Let them know what even let them know another language if possible, right? Because you're in a diverse environment here. Get them if they can get a language and to expose them. Like your exposure is so important. Activities, and these activities not just because you want them to go and get busy. Be intentional about the fact that are they developing skills that are required in life, that are required for them to be able to navigate this world that we're in, right? Because the people say, oh, activities, everybody is swimming. No, if it's swimming, what's the goal for that swimming? Is it to develop the skill or just to go and have fun and play? Or is there a bigger picture for them there? So I think it's so important that we talk about that. Now I was going to be wrapping things up here. Let's talk about what looking back at your younger self, what would you give no, not younger self, when you came into Canada, what would you advise someone who is just stepping in, who is trying to find their way, who is getting confused and overwhelmed? What advice would you give that person right now to keep pushing on and keep pressing on?
I would say be kind to yourself.
Mm,
The beginning might be rough. Don't let where you are right now, where you're starting from, define where you would end.
mm,
Cry if you must cry. Pause if you must pause. Rest if you need to rest, but do not give up. Some
mm,
days you won't have the answer. Some days you'll have the answer. That's okay. Ask for help if you need help. Stay very hopeful. Work on your mindset. And while you're doing all this, ensure you are celebrating your every wins.
mm,
Because I tell people, Always go for the
Mm.
low hanging fruits, so that when you achieve those low hanging fruits, it pushes you, it gives you the momentum to go for bigger things,
Bigger
right?
things. Yeah.
So always celebrate. And then I would also like to tell you that your journey is valid.
Mm.
Your dreams are possible, irrespective of whatever challenges you face. Trust me, if people tell you their stories, you'll be like, wow, you don't look like what you've been through. But
Mm.
just remember that you're not just starting over again, you are starting stronger. You have lots of experience, you have a lot of exposure that some people do not have. So be
Mm.
kind to yourself, right? And know that this too shall pass. When I
Yeah.
look back at how I used to be worried when I just landed, when those voices were speaking in my head, and now I'm like doing, ah, man, if only you knew things where you could see the future, you have been kind to yourself. So I will say the same to you. Be kind to yourself. If you have to cry, cry. Ask for help.
Mm.
Celebrate your wins, and
That's
you
right.
will be fine.
That's right. Thank you so much, Adedoyin. To wrap things up, I asked my guests three questions. And you can answer this question in one word, and that's the rule. If you have to expatiate one, we can allow that. So the first question is, if there's one book that has made a huge impact in your life, what would that book be?
I'm smiling because I've watched a lot of your podcasts, and I was like, what's Emeka going to ask me? But anyways, I would say the book that I would mention would be Who Moved My Cheese. It
Hmm.
was written by Spencer Johnson. I can expand on it, and so some like, oh, wow, that's a child book. Mm-mm. So for me, that book really touched me because it is a very simple book. I like simple stories, and that's why my book Shush is quite simple and relatable. This book, Who Moved My Cheese, is very simple but so profound,
Hmm.
and because it holds a deep truth about change, it helps you focus on growth. When growth happens, embrace it. Be curious for what is to come,
Hmm.
because your new cheese might be a lot better than what you have lost.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. I saw that book. I don't know if I read it, but growing up, I think I stumbled on that book, but I'm not sure I read it. But I've heard a lot about that. Who moved my cheese book?
I would
That's
recommend you go and read it. I've read it
yeah.
again. I have it, and I was just this time around. It had
Yeah.
read it again recently, and it just had even a different perspective. Now I
That's
could relate it to my life now as an immigrant, right?
hmm.
And starting all over and facing all the uncertainties, all the discomfort, I could relate it, and it was just real. So I would say pick it, and it
Hmm.
won't take you time. Very simple,
Yeah.
easy to read. I would encourage people to read that. It's very, and when they're picking that up, they should also be picking Shush.
Shush. Yeah, we'll put a link to Shush.
Yeah,
I'll get it from you. Put a link to Shush so people can get a copy. Click the link on the podcast, either YouTube or wherever you watch your podcast or listen to your podcast, and you can get the link to get a copy of the book. Now, the second question: what is the most unconventional piece of advice that you have received that turned out to be incredibly valuable?
Hmm. I would I would say it's something my mom used to say to me while I was growing up,
Mm,
and it is do not be the first to bail the cat. So she'll say it this way: don't be the first to bail the cat. It's very unconventional, but
mm,
yet it is thought provoking. And it's taken from a very old fable about the mice deciding. They were discussing who was to put a bail on the cat so that they could warn them when the cat is coming in, right? Because none
mm,
of them wanted to take the risk. So my mom would say that's what she would say, but then what she was trying to say, and which right now I'm thinking right now, and it's become valuable to me, is that it says, do not always be the first to take risky action. Observe,
mm, mm.
strategize, access the outcome first. So now, even growing up, so I'm like, okay, doing, you won't be the first to build with that. Sit down, think about the pros, think about the cons, observe it, strategize, think about the
The pros
outcome.
and
What would it
cons.
have exactly?
Hmm.
And in other words, try to avoid unnecessary heroism
Yeah,
when the timing is right, right?
yeah. I
So,
mean,
and
take calculated risk. So, you know,
yeah, be
yeah,
strategic.
in
Think
this,
about
yeah, you have to take calculated risk. Like, yeah, people say no risk, no reward, but it's not just taking risk recklessly. You have to take calculated risk,
yes, yes,
and yeah.
and sorry, I would like to also kind of related to being an immigrant in this part. Like we should be bold, right, but not being reckless. So in other words, if we are new in an environment, right, like in the workplace as an immigrant or in a new country, sometimes it is wise to one, listen more before we act, ask questions, observe unspoken rules, a lot of unspoken rules. And so
Mm,
that when you finally open your mouth to talk or when you finally take actions, they would carry weight. People will be like, man,
very
this
well.
person is obviously wise.
That's right. That's right. And the final question is outside of work, what hobbies, oh, you said it already. What hobbies or interests brings joy?
Okay, I said it
Balance.
already.
You said it,
I could see, I could see
baking,
your face.
right?
Okay, so like I tell people, and it's something that I picked up about how many years ago after COVID, right? I just because for me every year I always like to pick up new skills, either
Mm,
one or two. So one of those years was baking, and at
right.
the end of the day, I found out that it helped me distress because then COVID, you all know, it was a very tough time, right?
Mm,
It helped me distress, and over time, I've not only turned it into a therapy, but it also kind of now I make beautiful decorated cakes that people are paying for it. So
yeah,
baking, and aside if I'm not baking, I love to travel
nice.
and
That's
spend
good.
time with my family.
Family. That's
Yeah,
good. Thank you so much, Adedoyin, for being on the show. I know we will have some other conversation some other time, but it was a
absolutely.
pleasure having you on the podcast. Please, if you're listening for the very first time, tell us what you think about today's episode, and be sure to subscribe. We have a lot of people who listen. I can see back end we have a lot of listeners, but we don't have as much followers to the podcast. So please, once you listen, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button. It would do us a lot of good. Until we come your way in the next episode, remember your growth is personal. No one is responsible for your personal growth, but you. Stay blessed and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you love this episode, share it with your friends on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. If you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our episode, and give us a rating. This will help our podcast get more visibility to those who don't know about this podcast. Remember, your growth is personal. No one is responsible for your personal growth but you. Stay blessed.